Good morning, everyone, to Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee, meeting number 17 for October 3rd, 2024. It's so nice to see so many people in the gallery here and online. I'd like to say welcome to our Acting General Manager, Vivi Chi, here with us this morning. And of course, we'd like to welcome our new General Manager for Strategic Initiative, Debbie Stewart. So welcome, both of you. I think that's your first time in Iraq, so we hope we'll have a good show for you and you enjoy our Rural Affairs Committee. So thank you very much, both of you, for being here. And of course, thank you for our staff and all our partners and everyone is attending this morning. I would like to begin by acknowledging that this meeting is being held on an unceded Anishinaabe-Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe-Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. I'd like to ask Kelly to do roll call, please. Kelly.
Councillor Brown?
Here.
Councillor Kitts?
Here.
Councillor Luloff?
Good morning.
Councillor Kelly?
Present.
Chair Derouge, you have quorum.
Thank you. This is a public meeting to consider the proceed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as item 4.1 and 4.2 on today's agenda. For items just mentioned, only those specifically identified in the Planning Act who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal if Council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of the receipt of the application for a zoning bylaw amendment and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit a written commitment on these amendments prior to their consideration by City Council on October 16, 2024, please email or call the committee or council coordinator. We're just going to clear the agenda quick so we can give some enough time for some items that so staff can go back to work, and then we'll go back to the held items. So that's how we're going to go with the meeting today. Do we have any declaration of interest? Seeing none. We have a 3.1 confirmation of ERAC minutes 16 Thursday, September 3rd, 2024. Is that carried? Thank you. We have 4.1 zoning bylaw amendment 930 Smith Road. We have our staff, Jasdeep Brar, our planner is on here. There is any presentation if required, but I think we're good. No delegation, no correspondence. The applicant is here with us, John. If we move on and we carry this, you have any concern or we're good? Thank you. So the recommendation is that the Agricultural Rural Affairs Committee recommend Council approve an amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for 930 Smith Road as shown in document 1 to permit 7 residential lots as detailed in document 2. The Agricultural Rural Affairs Committee approved the consultation detail section of this report. Is that carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Thank you very much. 4.2 omnibus official plan, we're going to hold that. We have a delegation and presentation. Thank you. Strategic initiative with 5.1, we have a site alteration bylaw update, and we're going to hold that one because we also have a delegation. 6.1, it's a Faulkner Municipal Drain appointment of engineer. We have no presentation, no delegation. We have our staff, Dave Ryan. If there is any question, I'll go to the recommendation that the Agricultural Rural Affairs Committee recommend Council appoint Mr. Andy Robinson, Engineering of Robinson Consultant, Inc., as the engineer of the record to prepare a report that addresses the changes in the land use within the Faulkner Municipal Drain, including whether the Faulkner Municipal Drain downstream has the existing capacity to accommodate the additional volume and rate of water for Council's consideration prior to Council making decision under subsection 65(1) of the Drainage Act. Any question? Is that carried?
Carried.
Thank you very much. Second, 6.2, it's similar, also another Lily Municipal Drain. We also have Dave Ryan. There's no presentation, no delegation, no correspondence. Recommendation is that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend council appoint Mr. Andy Robinson, Engineering Robinson Consulting Inc., as the engineer of record to prepare preliminary report under Section 10-1 of the Drainage Act in response to a petition received under Section 4 of the Drainage Act as described in this report. Question? Carried?
Carried.
That's carried. Thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You can go back to work now. 7.1, it's a all-way protected permitted left turn signal at intersection of River Road and Mitch Owens Road. We have a staff, if we have questions, Stuart Edson here is with us. A recommendation that the Agricultural Rural Affairs Committee recommend that council approve the installation of protected permit left turn facing advanced left turn arrow in all direction at the intersection of River Road and Mitch Owens Road. No question. Is that carried?
Carried.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Stuart. We have additional motion of the will of the committee. I think we have, we need to add the motion. So, Councilor Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And if it's the will of the committee, I'd like to read this in so we can action it today. It's a time-sensitive matter. That the following motion be added for consideration as an additional item at the October 3rd, 2024 meeting of the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee pursuant to subsection 89, paragraph 3 of the procedure bylaw. Whereas council approved a front-ending agreement for the construction of a new roundabout at Perth and Maynell Road in the village of Richmond on the 12th of July, 2023 for a value of $5,209,743.06 plus applicable HST. And whereas the approach from the east leg on Perth Street between Maynell Road and Rochelle Drive has been converted from a rural cross-section to an urban cross-section with a curb on the north side to accommodate a new sidewalk and cycling facility to benefit residents living in the developing community. And whereas the north side curb in place, local farmers have expressed concern that it is difficult to navigate the east approach to the roundabout with their oversized farm equipment. And whereas there is a right-of-way available on the south side section of Perth Street between Maynell and Rochelle Drive to provide that additional width to accommodate oversized farm equipment. And whereas staff working with the developer's consultant have proposed a design modification that expands the pavement width by 2.8 meters on the south side of Perth Street for a distance of 250 meters with some additional modifications to the constructed splitter island curbs at the roundabout while leaving other constructed elements intact. And whereas the estimated cost for the additional works is $620,000 plus applicable HST, which includes design, construction, project management, and contingency, and is fully funded through development charges. And whereas the roundabout contractor is still on site, therefore be it resolved that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend that council authorize the city and delegate authority to the General Manager, Planning, Development, and Building Services Department to amend the front-ending agreement with Kaivan for the design and construction of the roundabout at Perth Street and Maynell Road and Oldenburg Avenue to an increased upset limit of $5,829,743.06 plus applicable HST in accordance with the front-ending agreement principles and policy, and with the final form and content being to the satisfaction of the city solicitor. And be it further resolved that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend that council authorize the financial disbursement to reimburse the design and construction costs incurred by Kaivan pursuant to the amended front-ending agreement to an increased maximum amount of $5,829,743.06 plus the applicable HST for the roundabout at Perth Street and Maynell Road and Oldenburg Avenue, and in accordance with the reimbursement schedule set out in the front-ending agreement. And be it further resolved that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend council approve account number 911681 FEA 2024 Perth Street and Maynell Oldenburg to be increased to the aforementioned amount plus the applicable HST 100% funded by development charges. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Before we vote on the motion, I just want to make a small comment, and I want to thank Councillor Brown and Councillor Kelly and staff. And I want to thank you also, Vivi, for you and your team to addressing those issues that we're having in rural area ahead to finish and complete. And I understand this is very time sensitive. Also, our rural resident really, it is hard for them to use their equipment and bring their equipment on an urban design where you are in rural area. When you have an intersection roundabout around you, all farmer field, and we use our equipment to harvest and to plant, it's very difficult on them to be able to bring their equipment in and out. And I'm hoping in the future, Councillor Kitt faced these challenges before, and we're hoping that we'll at earlier level before we cost and spend all that money. When rural councillors come and address some of the issue, I'm hoping that take it a little bit more serious. And I understand you take it very serious, but it a little bit more addressing those equipment and issues that we have. So we'll not be here again on the situation like that. But I do want to thank your team for working with us. And I want to thank Councillor Brown, listening to his community and addressing this issue on the ground. So thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Is that motion carried?
Carried. Thank you, committee.
Any
colleagues.
question? Go ahead. So did I stole your speech? So you can just say, I agree. I'm glad. Well, thank you very much. Is that motion carried? Thank you. We're gonna go back to, I think it's 4.2. And we do have presentation from staff. So I want to ask Royce and Ben. We'll give them a few minutes to set up, and they have a small presentation for us. And then after that, we have a couple motion. We'll bring them up before the delegation speaks, and then we'll go to delegation.
Thank you, Chair and members of committee. So I'd like to reintroduce Ben Morin to the committee. He was here last year presenting on Omnibus 1, and he's back with us on the much anticipated sequel, Omnibus 2. So turn it over to Mr. Morin to take us through the presentation.
Thank you, Chair and members of committee. Next slide, please. We are here today to provide an overview of the Omnibus 2 report. The recommendations of the report are as follows: that the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee and the Planning and Housing Committee recommend Council approve and adopt this official plan amendment. That the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee recommend Council approve one amendment separated from the main report, being the removal of 1600 Stagecoach Road from the village of Greeley, and that the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee and Planning and Housing Committee approve the consultation details section of this report. Next slide, please. This report recommends a series of amendments to ensure that the official plan aligns with provincial legislation, is accurate, and is effective. The changes include corrections of errors or omissions, clarifications to improve implementation, and updates based on changes to legislation, council direction, or to better align with the overall intent of the plan. Next slide, please. This will be the second of 3 anticipated omnibus reports. It is primarily focused on changes to Volume 1 of the official plan. Next slide, please. Since the adoption of Omnibus Amendment 1 in September 2023, there have been 2 major legislative changes that have affected the official plan. These include the approval of Bill 150, the Planning Statute Amendment Act. This bill reversed all modifications made by the province to Ottawa's official plan, as well as Bill 162, which reinstated 6 minister changes relating to minor corridor heights. Next slide, please. This report includes 65 amendments, of which 56 are citywide and urban for consideration by the Planning and Housing Committee. 8 are rural for consideration by the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee, and 1 is a separate rural amendment for consideration by the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee. Next slide, please. So this slide shows a breakdown of the amendments by official plan section. Next slide, please. And it's continued on this slide here. Thank you. Next slide, please. So we wanted to bring to your attention a few key amendments. First, this omnibus proposes to add a definition and delineate historical settlements on Schedule B9. These are currently referenced in the official plan without being defined or shown. Next slide, please. These are the 12 historical settlements that staff have identified per their proposed definition. Next slide, please. This omnibus also includes amendments to implement a council motion from October 14th, 2021 regarding country lot subdivisions. The proposed changes would allow for the consideration to relocate unbuilt country lot subdivisions adjacent to villages or existing country lot subdivision lands. Currently, they can only be transferred to locations adjacent to villages. And increase the eligibility of unbuilt country lot subdivisions for relocations to include complete applications submitted prior to the moratorium in 2009, as long as they later receive draft approval. Next slide, please. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you for your time, Chair and members of committee. We'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And before we go to question, we have some motions we'd like to introduce. I'm going to ask Councillor Clark Kelly to represent the motion, if that's possible.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Whereas upon approving the City of Ottawa's new official plan in 2021, Council directed staff to review policies surrounding estate lot subdivisions in the rural area with a focus on ensuring any historic applications are clustered near existing subdivisions, villages, and whereas there are only a handful of such applications that would qualify under the proposed amendment, and whereas applications for estate lot subdivisions which were relocated would still be required to go through development application process, and whereas historic applications where they were approved and constructed would be more suitable if they were adjacent to his existing developments. Therefore, be it resolved that staff revise the recommended amendment of Volume 1, Section 3.4, Policy 8 to remove the conditions of draft approval, final approval, or registration and replace Policy 8A as follows. The application in the former location is eligible for consideration for a country lot estate subdivision as per Section 9.2.3, Policy 4 in Volume 1, and area-specific Policy 30.1, Volume 2C. And no development of any kind or local street construction has occurred, and therefore be it resolved that revised amendment 57A and Appendix B, rural amendments, be amended to clarify that a new location is eligible if abutting existing country lot estate subdivision existed as of November 4th, 2022.
Thank you. Next one.
Whereas report ACS 2024 PDBPS 0087 Omnibus 2 official plan amendment is targeting the City Council meeting on October 16th, 2024. And whereas staff have received multiple submissions relating to the proposed amendments in the report following its publication on eScribe, and whereas staff would like to additional time to review the submissions ahead of council, and whereas a case management conference with the Ontario Land Tribunal related to the 1600 Stagecoach Drive is scheduled for October 17th, 2024. Therefore, be it resolved that the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee adopt the following additional recommendation. That recommendation 2 and proposed official plan amendment 35 proceed directly from Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee to council meeting of October 16th, 2024. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clark Kelly. And as usual, we're going to hold our questions till after. We're going to allow the delegation to come and speak. So we're going to start first with our delegation, Mr. Dan Anderson from Sunset Lake Development, and Mr. Murray Shaw concerning 1600 Stagecoach Road. And we'll give you a minute to get here, and you have 5 minutes to address the committee. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah. I'll give him this one on.
I'm only giving you 5 minutes. I don't know why you need a chair. Sorry about that, and thank you very much, both of you, for being here, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Dan Anderson, President of Sunset Lakes Developments. We have been doing subdivisions in the village of Greeley for over 30 years, approximately 800 subdivision lots, as well as the foodland parcel, exclusively working in the village. In 2010, we acquired 2 parcels, one of them in the village, one abutting the village. So 1,600 Stagecoach has been under application review since 2010. It was all the studies were prepared for half-acre lots, reviewed and refused as being premature in 2015. Next time around, there were expectations that it would be considered, and it was not considered again, not because anyone said there was anything of merit wrong with the subdivision, but it was a numbers game that somehow there was this inexhaustible supply of lots in Greeley and an inexhaustible supply of lots in the rural area, which I checked last night with a realtor, and I've been checking the last few months, but as of last night on MLS in the village boundary of Greeley, there are 3 lots available for sale. There's 1 lot outside the village in that area. There is not an inexhaustible lot supply. Greeley is the largest village of the 26 in area and one of the largest, depending on the population counts, but approximately 10,000 people. 3 lots is not sufficient, nor is 45 lots. So after refusing to expand the boundary again, presumably on the numbers issue, the province brought it in November 4th, 2022. We then set about to work with staff, and I will say that it was a collaborative effort, probably one of the best interactions I've had with staff in 30 years of development. Jeff Ostavichuk, Matt Haley, Kevin Hall. We had a pre-consult, we had thorough notes. We worked well on the subdivision. Our biologists talked to their biologists. We modified the lot pattern, the tree saving. We modified the plan. We knocked off 51 lots from the original application, came in with an application of 71 lots. As part of the collaboration, a motion went as OPA 5 to amend the secondary plan because there appeared to be an error in the provincial adoption of all of the various plans relating to Greeley. OPA 5, in fact, modified the secondary plan to include this land in the village and modified Transact B9 of the main official plan where the City of Ottawa adopted this land as part of Transact B9 in the main official plan, bringing it into the village so that when the province removed their action, the province cannot and did not modify the municipal adoption under OPA 5. We then moved forward and filed the application of subdivision. The subdivision was deemed complete. The subdivision was circulated to all agencies. Comments were received, including over 70 neighbor resident comments. All the studies were reviewed and considered, and we received a complete report from staff. We are now at the stage where we are ready to negotiate conditions of draft approval. So this is not a matter of clerical addressing something that was a clerical problem. We are now being asked to remove 71 units from the housing supply. Now, in dealing with the people that go in these units, they're moving out of townhouses and singles and sometimes merging families from apartments. So we're creating 71 housing units in a village where the economy is largely involved with home building. Devereaux Septic, electricians, plumbers. The home building industry right now in Greeley is in dire need of supply. This would address that. And by asking that this matter be moved, we need to consider all of the various aspects of the planning. And Mr. Chowan from Novatech Planning, who we're privileged to have as our planner on this, is going to address some of the key elements. And all I'm asking is that we don't move this forward. We don't need to take action on this. This is a matter that has already occurred. This is a good thing for the city. It's a good thing for the village. I'll just give you a quick look at the subdivision. And we've all done a good job on this. there's tree saving. There's an existing 5-acre lake. At that end of the lake, they will be adding about 3 acres of municipal park to the 1.5 acres that's already there. They're adding 2 ponds, so there will be 4
Can you
ponds.
please wrap up then?
Sorry?
Can you please wrap up? I give you.
Okay,
5
I'm sorry. Okay. Anyway, it's a good design, lots of benefit for the community and neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shaw.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, and I fully endorse everything that Dan has said with respect to the need to provide a supply of residential lots in the village of Greeley. The supply today is dire, and killing this project, which is the effect of OPA 35, eliminates the opportunity to bring in 71 lots on stream. Just to recap on the history, the minister modified the city's official plan in November of 2022 after considering public comments to include these lands in the village of Greeley. In September of 2023, City of Ottawa passed official plan amendment number 5, which basically cleaned up the minister's modification, added these lands to the boundary of the village on Schedule B9, and included these lands as residential in the secondary plan. Based on the modification and based on the OPA, we worked diligently with staff to prepare and file a draft plan of subdivision application. That draft plan application was filed in January of this year, over 9 months ago. That application was deemed complete by staff, circulated by staff, and we have received comprehensive comments from staff on that application. Despite all of that, staff have issued a very brief report refusing our application. That refusal of the plan of subdivision, they can explain why they've refused it or try. That refusal has been appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. There is a case management conference on October the 17th. And I'm intrigued by the second motion that was read into the record by Councillor Kelly that urges ARAC and council to deal with OPA 35 before the case management conference on October 17th. We would urge you to do the exact opposite. First and foremost, we think ARAC should not be recommending this official plan amendment to council. It's inappropriate and it compromises our ability to move forward with the subdivision application that fully conforms with your official plan as it exists today. So we'd urge you to actually remove the recommendation from the report entirely. Failing that, we would urge you to defer consideration of OPA 35 until the Ontario Land Tribunal has dealt with our appeal. We're wasting a great deal of time and energy dealing with this at this point in time. Quite frankly, there's no urgency for you to deal with this. There's no statutory requirement for you to deal with this. We would strongly recommend that you withdraw the item from the recommendations today, failing which that you defer consideration of the official plan amendment 35 until the Ontario Land Tribunal has dealt with our appeals on the draft plan of subdivision. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shawn. I'm going to see the committee if they have question for you. I'm sure we'll have question to staff after, but thank you very much for both of you being here. And we appreciate taking the time to speak to our committee.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if this is a question for staff or for legal, perhaps both. Say ARAC is sympathetic to the case that Mr. Anderson just brought forward. Do we have the ability here to do what he's suggesting, or is it out of our hands from a legal perspective?
Mr. Chair, the matter that's before the tribunal for the case management conference on October 17th is dealing solely with a subdivision, which is a completely separate application under the Planning Act. The OPA may be considered today by committee and then rise to council further to the motion that's brought forward, so that there is a position with respect to the reversal by the province to exclude this parcel. These, in my opinion, are completely separate matters. They do overlap in terms of what the applicant's interest is, but your hands are not tied today with respect to this, nor with bringing it forward to council prior to the CMC.
Thank you very much. Any other question?
Okay, sorry. So if we reject the OPA, in my view, we are just following through with what the province has directed us, correct? It's not really for this committee to reject the OPA. We don't really have the ability to do that, correct?
So from a legal perspective, I consider this to be a housekeeping matter following the direction that the province has already given. Mr. Fu can certainly provide a planning analysis of that direction, given the history of the ministerial approval of our official plan.
Thank you. And I also, while you're going to be on the mic, Royce, maybe you can give the committee just a little history of why we're here today. Because we've went through the of our official plan, the province added them. They took them out, and we already put an omnibus 2 years ago in September, and ahead of while we knew that this official plan is going to be implemented. So if you give them a little history, I really appreciate it. I know we're taking time, but it's important that we make a right decision on this one.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair, and just to answer the councillor's question directly, the adoption of the amendment before committee today implements the minister's decision. So in terms of the history, the official plan was adopted with no expansion to any of the village area boundaries. And then the minister, a year later, in November 4th, 2022, approved the official plan with modifications, 30 modifications, of which many of them related to the addition of the village of Greeley and updating the schedules to reflect the addition of 1600 stagecoach within the boundaries of the village of Greeley. However, despite the numerous modifications to add the lands to the village of Greeley, the minister unfortunately did not provide a designation in the village plan. So by essence, the village plan had an extension to add 1600 stagecoach without any designation. So as part of the OP implementation work plan, after the official plan was approved, staff brought forward an amendment through Omnibus 1 that added that designation of village residential to the village plan in line with the minister's modifications and the intent for these lands to be part of the village of Greeley. That was through Bill 150. About a year later, through Bill 162, the minister had reversed decisions made to official plans, including Ottawa, which removed all of the modifications, including the addition of 1600 stagecoach to all the relevant schedules in the official plan. However, because Omnibus 1 through OPA 5 was not subject to the minister's modifications, the reversal of those modifications did not also change council's adoption of OPA 5. So what we're left with today is lands that are not within the village of Greeley. The adoption of that legislation by provincial government is to the fact that those modifications were deemed to never come into force. So right now, 1600 stagecoach is not within the village of Greeley on Schedule B9. but we are left with an anomaly of village residential on 1600 Stagecoach outside of the village boundaries. So the amendment before you today seeks to remove that designation in order to align with the decisions by the province.
Thank you for that. So what I'm hearing is this was a provincial decision, it's minister's direction. And even though we're being asked to vote on it, we really don't have the ability to reject the minister's direction.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kit. Thank you very much for the history of what happened. And then we are discussing this today because of the matter of what they came in the village. They came into our official plan, then they were pulled out. But we've already went ahead and we did designation in our omnibus. And I totally understand. And we did have the opportunity, if we want to, when the motion went to council while back to take those land back out. And so we're here right now, phases under policy. We already said we don't want them. And then now we're back to trying to revise our designation into this omnibus. My question to you will be, so, okay, we're here today. We have shorting of housing. I understand where Mr. Anderson's coming from. I live in Greeley, this subdivision, I'm well aware of it. And everybody knows in Greeley that this subdivision is going to come today or tomorrow. In your perspective and work plan, we've been talking and working about village boundary expansion and all that. When do you think this will have an expectation in time that we can be able to rediscuss those land and move forward as would be designated when we do the village boundary expansion? Can you give us a little timeline or when they'll have the opportunity to be able to come back and discuss that?
So, Mr. Chair, in short, the opportunity for committee and council to revisit additions to the village areas would be through the next official plan review. That is the regular cycle where we would review our growth projections and do an assessment of our land needs. In addition, committee and council could also direct staff to initiate that review at any time.
Thank you. And that will be proper time when we do, I'm assuming, when we go to the joint committee on October 9, to when we can give you maybe some direction on that. Am I correct on that?
That would be an opportunity, Mr. Chair, correct?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the question and answer. This is very difficult file and very hard, to talk about, especially those subdivisions in rural area. And today we'll be having inquiry and then we'll be working on some direction to staff in our next meeting. In the meantime, we have a motion. We have a motion to deal with it today, but I think you answered all the questions for the committee, so we appreciate that. Thank you. Our next presenter will be Melissa Cote from Taggart. You have Melissa's around?
Yes. Good morning, Chair and Committee. I've registered to speak in support of revised amendment number 50 for council consideration regarding the Leitrim Community Design Plan area. It is a citywide and urban amendment, so if there's no questions or concerns, I don't need to speak.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate your being here to answer any question we have. And seeing none, thank you very much, Melissa. We appreciate you here and your support to the report.
Thank you.
Number 3, we have Lisa Della Rosa from Fontaine on behalf of GOBA. I saw Lisa on the line earlier. Good morning, Lisa. You have 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you very much for your introduction, Councillor DeRose and members of committee. As mentioned, I'm Lisa Della Rosa and I'm an associate with Boat 10 Planning and Design, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of GOBA. So I did want to first start by saying that throughout this whole process of preparing these official plan amendments for Omnibus 2, city staff have been very welcoming of our comments, and we've worked together to resolve some of the association's original concerns. And so for that, we wanted to send our appreciation. That said, there still does remain a few amendments that we do want to highlight, and these were listed in our written submission. So my presentation here here will be brief and more details can be found in what we submitted. So there are two categories of concerns that we are raising: reporting errors and amendments that cannot be supported as proposed. These are citywide concerns, so there's none specific to the rural area. So starting with reporting errors, it appears that amendments 9, 17, and 19 contain oversights, most likely related to the drafting of the document. In our opinion, I think these are easy fixes. And moving forward to the more specific amendments that GOBA cannot support as currently proposed are Amendment 6, 13, 27, 45, and 62. I'm going to spend a little bit of time going through those each. So Amendment 6, as proposed, will not allow for the removal of an area from a future neighborhood overlay until the completion of a secondary plan. However, there are some areas due to size and ownership that could proceed through an area-specific policy. So some modification to the current proposed policy as listed in the amendment table needs to be given to allow for this possibility if needed. On Amendment 13, this is the city's approach to no net loss for wetlands and forest cover. While GOBA has no concern with the intent of the policy, the proposed wording requires some refinement, as there's been some recent interpretation issues with not only what's currently in the OP, but also what is being proposed. Our submission does contain some suggested wording that we believe will resolve the issue and concern. Amendment 27 was welcomed. It changed, it provided some changes allowing for some minor flexibility in height within special districts. However, that amendment doesn't deal with high-rise category, only low-rise and mid-rise. We request further changes to that amendment to permit slight increases in high-rise height with a zoning change application and not requiring an OPA. So that would be consistent with how they're moving forward with the low rise and mid rise in that amendment. And then amendments 45 and 62 was the topic of an actual separate meeting with staff. And while there's no concern with part 2 of amendment 45 related to the former CN rail corridor north of Walkley Road, there still requires some discussion on the final wording and mapping for protected transportation corridors. So we ask that amendment 45 part 1 and amendment 62 be removed from consideration today and be brought forward later to allow for a bit more time to confirm the amendments. So considering GOBA's position, we recommend that members of Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee direct staff to reconsider omnibus amendments 6, 9, 13, 17, 19, and 27 and defer amendments 45 part 1 and 62. So with that, I'm going to thank you for the opportunity to provide these comments and pleased to answer any questions or provide further clarification if required.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I don't see any question. I do have a question concerning number 13, but I will be asking this after the presentation because that's going to relate to the whole report. But we thank you very much for your presentation. And I noted we did have a communication from GOBA on October 2nd, 2024, and we sent it to all council.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Murray Shawn again from Novotech. Mr. Shawn, you're welcome here this morning. And this time we do have a chair for you ready. And I'm only giving you 5 minutes. Thank you.
2 chairs, and I don't need 2 chairs. Thank you, Chair DeRuz, members of the committee. My submissions will be very brief. Novotech made, I would suggest, some fairly substantive submissions with respect to amendments 45 and 62, which relate to protected transportation corridors. We have not had any discussions with staff since making those submissions. And I don't believe that they will be resolved quickly. I fully support the submission from GOBA as articulated by my colleague Lisa De La Rosa that we would strongly urge ARAC to remove items 45 and 62 from the omnibus amendment to allow for additional time for some very robust discussions with staff about the effect of those proposals, the language of those proposals. I hope we can reach a consensus because failing which we're going to anticipate that the Greater Ottawa Home Builders will be appealing the amendment as it relates to those provisions. An result that I think we'd all prefer to avoid. So I would encourage ARAC to put forward a motion to remove items 45 and 62 from the amendment that's before you. Mr. Chair, you're going to rule me out of order, but I have to state that there is no obligation on the part of ARAC or council to approve OPA 35. With all due respect to your legal counsel, I think she has misinformed you. You do not have to adopt or approve OPA 35. Thank you very much.
I was going to rule you out, but thank you very much for the presentation. Any question? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Shawn, for your presentation.
Thank you.
We have a question to staff. Go ahead.
Okay, so what happens if we were, my last line of questioning, I said, we're just carrying out what the minister has directed us to. So what would happen if we voted against it?
Mr. Chair, with all due respect to Mr. Chown's planning opinion, my legal opinion is that we have no jurisdiction or authority to go against the minister's decision today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do have a question. Do you have any question, Dr. Good? I just have a clarification. I know that I did spoke before on item 13. I'd like to have a little bit on the record, more clarification on what is evaluated and what's not evaluated. I know we have Dr. Stowe with us. Maybe Nick, you can just maybe clarify that and maybe give the committee a clear picture on what we're meaning by those evaluated and not evaluated land. Thank you very much.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So we broadly have three categories of wetlands in Ottawa. We have wetlands that have been evaluated under the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System. Many of those, I would say most of those, have been deemed provincially significant, but some through evaluation have been found not to be provincially significant. And then we have unevaluated wetlands that have never been evaluated under the Ontario Wetland Evaluation System. And those represent about half of the wetlands in Ottawa. So the no net loss policy it was intended to apply to all wetlands, but through what we consider to be an error, it was ultimately restricted to just applying to evaluated wetlands or non-significant evaluated wetlands, leaving approximately half of Ottawa's wetlands not subject to the no net loss policy.
I really appreciate it. Thank you for the clarification because I did have concern with it and I understand where staff is coming from. So we appreciate answering any question. I see Councillor Kitt have a question.
Not to the doctor. Okay, thank you. So not to beat a dead horse, but just so that I think we have a better understanding. If we did vote against it, I hear what you're saying. We don't have legal jurisdiction to go against the minister's direction. If we did vote against it, what then would happen?
I'm going to pass that over to Mr. Fu to answer in terms of the context of the omnibus bylaw.
So, Mr. Chair, I believe staff would have to bring forward an amendment to bring back 1600 Stagecoach into the relevant schedules, such as B9, into the Village of Greeley, because right now they are out as per Bill 162 in reversal and administrative modification. So council would be having taken a position to add lands to the Village of Greeley. when we previously did not take that position in the adoption of the official plan.
And then the province would have to agree to that.
Mr. Chair, that would be a decision of council that's not subject to provincial approval.
Okay, but I think based on Councillor Giroux's previous questions, this work is, there may be an opportunity for that in short order.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I did ask these questions because I am sympathetic to the applicant, and I've talked at this committee before about how I do think we need moderate growth in villages to sustain them. So I am sympathetic, but I do appreciate sort of the legal position that we are in today, and I'm glad that there'll be an opportunity to relook at this in short order. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kit. And I want to continue on the comment that you made. So we did had an opportunity to keep those land back and when we brought motion and we were allowing them, but council right now said no. So we're back to square one, and all what we're doing right now is redoing the redesignation. So that's basically where we are today. So, but to answer and to clarify, I totally agree with you. We do need to look about our villages and about the growth and smart growth. We have cluster of villages everywhere, and then we have lands in between all of them. And then sometimes our policies, and to be fair to staff, our provincial policy statement also sometimes block some of those development. So we're going to be working with our staff very closely, especially the Agricultural Welfare Committee. What we heard from our rural residents throughout the Rural Summit, we will have a separate and different discussions on those villages, and committee members will have an opportunity on October 9 to work with staff and listen and put direction if that's what we want. But right now, in front of us, this omnibus we're going to move forward with. But I also have an inquiry at the end of this meeting to kind of initiate those discussions to look at our villages and our subdivisions in the rural area. But I do want to thank Royce for working very hard with us on this and his team. And I know, Ben, thank you very much for presentation and then understanding the situation in the rural area. So we have to vote on this one as at the beginning of the meeting, the presentation, the report recommendation. Do I have to read it again?
No, but you have to vote on motions.
Yeah. So can we vote on the motions first? Is motion number 1 by Councillor Kerry for 4.2 Omnibus 2. Is that carried?
Carried.
And then the second one, again, the amendment for 4.2 Omnibus on the official plan amendment.
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. And on the report, on the recommendation that's been presented in front of us, is that carried?
Carried. Carried.
Thank you very much, staff. I really appreciate the work, and thank you for all our delegation for bringing their concern forward with us. Thank you. We move 5.1. We have site alteration bylaw update. All our committee, we don't have presentation, but we do have a delegation. Mr. Paul Johannes, I know you're on the line. And we do have it. We have a report in our document, and Mr. Johannes will have a 5-minute to speak to the report. And we also have our staff here next door, and we have Amy McPherson somewhere to answer any question. Sorry, Amy. Yeah. If you have any question, we have the staff to answer. And I do want to, before we start with delegation, I do want to thank both of you for working very closely. And I know this is round 2. And I know you've been putting lots of effort and have done lots of consultation like we asked you to do prior to this meeting. And this is the last report coming out in front of us. I want to thank you for the work you've done. And I did see you visiting all the rural villages and doing your public consultation with all of us, each councillor. So we thank you for that. Mr. Johannes, I'll give you the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Giroux, members of the committee. So I'm here today representing the Green Space Alliance of Canada's capital to address the site alteration bylaw review. In the original staff report to the November 2023 meeting of this committee, Staff indicated that in their review, they had heard that rural residents had expressed concerns over the loss of natural heritage. And this is why they recommended that the application of Section 11, which deals with the protection of the natural environment, be extended to the rural area. And this was accomplished by striking out Article 1 of Section 11, which is a restriction of the application of the protection of natural environment. It reads, this section applies only to the area shown on Schedule B of this bylaw as amended. So now by striking that out, that made that provision of that section of the bylaw applicable to the entire territory of the city of Ottawa. So this was not disputed at the November 2023 meeting. And at the time, the expectation was that this application of Section 11 applying to the entire city, as recommended by staff, would be retained. However, it seems that as a result of the additional consultation directed by council, this restriction has now been reinstated in the current report. Now, what is lost by retaining this restriction is a means of preventing preemptive site alterations in or adjacent to natural heritage system lands. So development on those lands is prohibited in any official plan or restricted in the official plan. But this is only applied at the time of a planning application. So what if a landowner decides to clear cut a woodland or drain a wetland before making the planning application? Then it's too late to apply the official plan prohibitions. That natural feature is already gone. So this is the policy gap that the extension of the bylaw was meant to address. So our question to this committee is, how does the city intend to protect the natural heritage system in these circumstances in the absence of this bylaw? So the bylaw would at least require a notification to the city before undertaking a site alteration in or adjacent to the natural heritage system. Because really, notwithstanding all the exclusions and exceptions in this bylaw, including the agricultural use exemption, there are nonetheless situations where the application of the bylaw would preserve natural heritage system lands, which is a clear direction and priority of the official plan. So we ask that Article 1 of Section 11 of the site alteration bylaw be struck. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johannes, for your presentation. Any question from the committee? We appreciate it. Thank you for the presentation. We have no question. And we have a I'd like to highlight that we did have an email dated October 2nd also from Soloway Wright on behalf of GOBA. It was sent to all members of the committee. Report recommendation that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee recommend council approve 1, the proposed amendment to site alteration bylaw 2018-164 attached as document 1, and 2, that the general manager's strategic initiative and the city solicitor will be authorized to make the approved amendment and bring forward the bylaw to council for enactment. Is that carried?
Carried.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. We appreciate your work on that one. We have no in-camera item. We also I'd like to acknowledge number 9 also on the agenda as listed, the Ottawa Rural Clean Water Program 2023 Annual Report. We do have open mic session from Mr. Ben Koskowicz, research on rural transportation service to support aging in place in Cumberland. And we have 5 minutes for you to address the committee on an open mic, if Mr. Koskowicz with us. And I like to add, we have also Mr. Holmes. He's well known to our committee. Thank you both for being here this morning.
me now? Super. All right. Thank you, Chair and members of committee. My name is Ben Koskowicz, and I'm a master's student at Carleton University. My studies focused on designing rural transportation services to support aging in place. So today I'll talk a little bit about that study and some stuff that I learned. Next slide. For some background, the aging population in rural Ottawa is growing faster than in any other part of the city. With a projected growth rate of 183% over 20 years, it'll reach 30,000 individuals by 2031. Next slide, please. Now, rural transportation solutions for Ottawa. It has already conducted research finding that 64% of rural residents believe that the rural area would benefit from more transportation options, and they identified that these would support youth, older adults, commuters, and the growing diversity of rural communities. And my research focused on those older adults. Next slide, please. So the study was designed in partnership with RTS and Ken here, and in consultation with the Cumberland Community Association. I conducted 12 interviews with older adults in Cumberland, and I followed up those interviews with a manager at OC Transpo, where we reflected on some of what I heard in interviews. Next slide, please. So as a qualitative study, the focus was on gathering in-depth information from a small group of people. And in these interviews, we discussed people's current experiences, as well as older residents' visions for improved services. Next slide, please. So these interviews are based on a guide where I showed some existing examples to support people as they generated visions of what improved services could be. Next slide, please. So main findings of with transportation options people experience, the travel restrictions that are already being experienced by older residents, and their visions for improved services in the future. Next slide, please. So to show the impact of driving dependence currently, this is a quote from an 82-year-old woman describing her experience of transportation, and she highlights how the need to drive to access different services outside her community contributes to her feelings of isolation where she's at. Next slide. So driving itself also has challenges for older residents. Driving at night, traffic and parking, and driving in winter weather were all described as challenges. Next slide, please. Part of the reason that people are depending on driving is that older residents also encounter barriers with accessing other options. So these issues with driving alternatives were related to misalignment of services with people's individual needs and negative stories that they've heard from others about using services. And then there's also an element of communication where there's a lack of awareness of transportation services like those offered by the Eastern Auto Resource Center, or lack of understanding of transit schedules. Next slide, please. So those challenges impose restrictions on residents that affect their social participation. In separate interviews, I heard from people missing trips to the theater production or to theater productions in other parts of the city, someone unable to visit her sister living in the West End, someone who wasn't able to visit a longstanding friend in the West End, and someone who missed an ALS walk for lack of transportation, a cause that was important to her as she recently lost her husband from the disease. So as residents consider how these restrictions may get worse over time, they don't see themselves being able to stay in the community without driving. Next slide, please. But they did have visions for how services could be improved, which were often based on innovative service models. But common across these visions were that they needed better connection to public transit and central OC Transpo network. They should be operated affordably and efficiently, and they need to be aligned with community context and needs in terms of residents' needs and geography. Next slide. So in the transportation master plan, the city makes commitments to review the demand for rural transit and to seek solutions to improve it. From my study findings, I'd emphasize that it's important to anticipate changing needs over time of rural residents and the unmet transportation needs of people when reviewing demand. When seeking solutions, it's important to consider that older residents are open to innovative solutions and that these solutions are a way of supporting them to age in place. Next slide, please. So to conclude with some key takeaways, older adults in rural Ottawa are already experiencing travel restrictions affecting their social participation, even when they're still driving. Transportation does not currently support people to age in place as their needs change, but older residents are open to innovative ways of improving transportation as long as it is aligned with the needs of their community. Thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I have a question for you. We're going to start with Councillor Clark Kelly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation today, and you brought your coach with you. The only time he messed up was not asking you to put your mic on, so we'll get you set for the next new recruit, Ken. Thank you very much. This was something I heard about during the campaign when I ran in 2022. But obviously, paying for public transit is a big issue at our city right now. We've got a large deficit when it comes to that and some serious challenges in terms of delivering that service. And you've raised some good points and the need. What about solutions? Do you have any potential solutions to provide for us today? Covering a large area like West Carleton March would be very difficult with, you know, the current system and the bus fleet that we have, and it would be astronomical in terms of cost. Have you heard any good ideas? Do you have any thoughts to share with the committee today on things that we might be able to think about in the future?
Sure, yeah. So as I mentioned, this study was about seeing what older residents are thinking, what they would want to use for services. So some of the things that I talked about were the use of on-demand services, and that's based on seeing that there's an on-demand pilot already operating in Blackburn that's reflected in some of those visions, and it could be something that people on demand can get transit to the central network now in anticipation of the LRT expansion to Trim Road. That's something that's exciting for older residents. So either doing that in an on-demand way or having a circulating route that goes through the community just on some regular frequency, just giving access to public transit. I think the key thing here is that they're anticipating improved access to Orleans and to Trim Road and how to connect to there, because right now there's no connection really offered to their community.
Well, thank you very much. Given that your study was about the East End, I'll hand it over to my Eastern colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Ben, great presentation, very clear and easy to understand, which is great. And I know there are two truths in life. You're either a senior today or a future senior like us. So I know this is ideally, that's right. So this is something I know that is something that we pay attention to citywide. And every member of committee is going to be asking you some questions today. So I think that shows you the level of engagement that we have as councillors, but the needs that we experience across the city, helping our seniors age in place. We live in the rural area because we want to, and for the most part, I think residents want to stay there. And so finding ways to deliver those services to keep residents in the rural area is very important to us. Through your research, did you identify any particular commentary or thoughts about either supplementing the service that we currently have provided by OC Transpo with a different model, such as on demand or some type of ride hailing? And was there any commentary or feedback received about trying to offer a parallel service using private sector resources to complement the public transit that we have today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think something I mentioned was a key thing is that matching of the service to the community context. And some people felt that doing that, administering the service privately would be a way of having it fit the scale of the community better. They were more open to it, and kind of balancing that practical consideration of how is this service going to be affordable for us as users, but also affordable to us as taxpayers. And I think some sort of private service or a public-private partnership was something that people were open to and were discussing as something that had potential.
Thank you very much. And that's great to hear, because the one thing that committee members will be familiar with, but one size doesn't fit all. And all five of us continually repeat that across just about every service sector that we have here at the city. And certainly when it comes to transit, Councillor Drews, Councillor Kelly, and myself, each of our wards is larger than the urban part of the city of Ottawa. And so when you look at distance and travel time, it's important to, not for you, you're doing the research and you recognize this, but for our colleagues on council and staff to understand and recognize that what works in a highly dense neighborhood might not work out in a village context. So I think this is fantastic work. I think this committee would look forward to working with you in the future and receiving any other commentary or feedback that you might have. And you've got a great mentor sitting next to you. Ken has been on this file, I'm sure, for longer than I've been alive. So it's great to see, the teamwork here, and certainly appreciate your presentation today. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Kidd.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for being here. I'm a fellow Raven, so great to see you out, and excellent presentation. Councillor Lulov's hand is next. Cumberland Village used to be under my purview, and then the ward boundaries were redistributed, and now it's Councillor Lulov. So we both have experience in that area. I was glad to hear you bring up on demand. I too had made some inquiries as to whether that could be used in a rural context. I believe it's Belleville that has on-demand service in their rural areas working really well. So I'm looking forward to seeing that expanded. And I think to Councillor Brown's comments, in the context of Cumberland Village, we do have a lot of the traffic that comes through Cumberland is coming from east, from Rockland, and they do have a private bus company that does travel into the city. And so with Trim Station being where it is, I think that's an excellent opportunity to see if there is a possibility for increasing the frequency of service to Cumberland via that outside partner. So it's complicated because of collective agreements and all that fun stuff, but I appreciate the creative thinking, because I think given where we are with transit in this city, we need creative and new ideas for how to deliver it. So just wanted to say, really appreciate your work, a very excellent delegation. And I'm sure your mentor here, Ken, has mentioned the Rural Summit that's coming up on November 2nd. I really encourage you to join us. We do want some more young people to engage in these topics as well. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Kidd. And I'll leave Councillor Luloff now.
Thanks so much for your attention to this matter. This is something that we heard about at the Rural Summit workshops. I think every single one of us heard, hey, listen, we pay for transit, but we don't have any options. It's a major frustration in our rural area. And I appreciate the angle that you're coming from. A lot of people want to be able to age in their home, want to be able to stay in their home, and we've got so many barriers making that so difficult. Things like zoning, not allowing for things like compounding pharmacies to be able to be built on some main streets because of the zoning in rural villages, and then just being able to get around. I think Councillor Kitts is right. We do have a real opportunity with Stage 2 opening up and Trim Station, and we've had quite a few conversations with the mayor of Rockland about not bypassing that station. If there are people that are commuting in from further east than Cumberland Village, they should be made to get off at the transit station and support the transit system that the province, the federal government, and the city of Ottawa have spent billions of dollars on. It would also reduce the amount of traffic that we see on the 174 that's operating well beyond capacity as it is. It would make perfect sense that such an arrangement would allow for a stop in Cumberland Village instead of remaining on the 174, coming in onto Old Montreal Road, going down the main street, picking people up, and then continuing on to the roundabout at Trim and turning into the station would make so much sense. I really appreciate your attention to this matter. And I'm wondering, do you have any further details as to the timing that people were asking for? Was this an all-day request? Were there specific times that people were looking for? What sort of frequency did you hear about from the people that you were doing your interviews with in the village? Can you just expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So I think a key thing right now is that the services, the commuter bus that's there it's too early and too late for people. So there's a big gap in the central part of the day. And for the older people that interviewed, they're wanting to travel in that like 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. range around midday. So people had different suggestions about what the frequency can be, ranging from like an hourly service. But I think people were very pragmatic about that, and we're just asking for like maybe a couple more buses in the middle of the day so that they'd be able to get in and out if they needed to via public transit, and not relying on a super early service in the morning and then being stuck somewhere all day and having to come back. Just having a few bus options in the more central part of the day was basically what people wanted at minimum for frequency.
Sounds eminently reasonable to me. I really, really appreciate you doing this work. Would you please send this report to me? And with your permission, I'll pass it on to Renee and Pat Scrimger at OC Transpo. And on top of that, I'd like to reiterate the invitation to please join us at the Rural Summit with this. I think that the people that have been making the same points that you've been hearing would appreciate knowing that there's some attention being put to this issue. And I guess one last question for you: what program are you taking at the best university in Ottawa?
I'm studying industrial design.
Amazing. Well, from one raven to another, thank you very much. Truly appreciate your time today, and please pass that paper on to me. I think that it could make a difference in some of the work and the advocacy that we're doing in the East End to ensure that we have a viable transit system. Well done.
Okay, will do. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Roloff, and thank you very much, Ben, for being here. And like I reiterate that I encourage you to join us at the Rural Summit, and we appreciate your advocacy on behalf of our city and our rural communities, and specifically, I think Councillor Clark Kelly also will be looking for some of those study. If you have extra time, that would be great. But I also want to thank your mentor, Ken. Ken has been heavily involved in our Rural Summit, and he's been engaging with us. So I'm sure we'll be both present at the Rural Summit so we can hear more and we can find more solutions. So thank you both for being here this morning.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Go right
ahead. 11, we have a notice of motions. Of course, what would be ERAC without notice of motion from Councillor Brown?
Thank you very much, Chair, and to my council colleagues. I'm just looking to keep you busy and out of trouble, Mr. Chair. This is a notice of motion concerning the scope of the McBean Street resurfacing project. To save committee time, I'll just read in the therefore be it resolved. Therefore be it resolved that given the context of the corridor, the McBean Street resurfacing project scope of work be limited to widening the sidewalks and resurfacing the roadway. And be it further resolved that the McBean Street cycling project be removed from the 2023 Transportation Master Plan Active Transportation Project List and the 2024 Provisional DC Background Study, resulting in removal of DC funding for the cycling project. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brown, for that. And we do have number 12, we have inquiries, Councillor Kelly and myself. I'll start with Councillor Kelly. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Ditching and drainage, there's a huge issue in my ward. One day last week, we got 11 calls and emails about it. So I'm hoping to make some progress on that file, and this inquiry hopefully will help me do that. How many service requests have been placed in each of the past 5 years requesting ditch maintenance in Ward 5 specifically and citywide more generally? What is the percentage increase or decrease in those 5 years? How many of these requests are sent to roads for review and action, and how many are dealt with by infrastructure and water services? What is the average length of time to receive action and close these requests? How many requests in each of the past 5 years have been closed without action or correspondence to the resident? How many property owners have engaged the city to begin the process for municipal drain or petition drain in each of the past 5 years? How many of these requests have resulted in a new municipal drain or petition drain? How many property owners have engaged the city in the past 5 years to begin local improvement process to solve drainage issues? How many of those engagements have resulted in a local improvement drainage area? Where are those located? Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Inquiry from myself, and just a little comment on this one. Throughout our rural summit, we have heard a lot about making our rural villages more vibrant. And I know, but we've heard today concerning our omnibus and what's coming in the future from our planning staff. I'm hoping that they can accommodate that inquiry for our General Manager of Planning, Development and Building Services. With reference to the omnibus report and more specifically Amendment 57 and 57A, can staff please provide information regarding the applications for state lot subdivisions that were approved and deemed complete prior to December 31st, 2009? When were they initially submitted and what actions have been taken by the applicants to advance these applications since December 31st, 2009? How do these historic applications factor into our annual rural residential land survey and our rural growth projections? Additionally, what mechanism, if any, does the municipality have to dismiss legacy applications that have not advanced to draft approval? Thank you. We have no other business, number 13, and 14, we have adjournment. Our next meeting will be Thursday, November 7. That meeting is adjourned. Is that carried? Thank you. 11:21. Great. Thank you very much, everyone, and I appreciate you being here.